First of all, we call an excellent dialogue on human mobility in the Americas, in the UN system, and also with the UN system. And I really want to welcome very especially our esteemed ministers, Minister Luis Gilberto Murillo from Colombia, Minister Eduardo Enrique Reina from Honduras. I think we are so pleased to have you with us, both of you. As you know, Eduardo Enrique Reina is the head of CELAC, and of course, Colombia is going to receive CELAC very soon. I also want to welcome Carlos Fernandez de Cosillo. He's a very good friend from Cuba. And of course, we have our representatives from different organizations, Filippo Grandi from ACNUR, as we call it in Spanish, OUNHCR, all the things. Okay, and then, of course, we do have the distinguished representatives from IOM, yes, you know, these translations are horrible. And then, of course, we have Andrew Steele and Marshall Fitz. Thank you so much for joining us today. And who else I'm missing? I'm missing Jennifer Davis. So good to have you with us, Senior U.S. Coordinator of the Bureau. And Marcel Escobari. Where is Marcel Escobari? Marcel Escobari, thank you so much. And Alexandra Piles, thank you for all for joining us this afternoon. So what we're going to discuss this afternoon very briefly is, and of course, I want to thank the Permanent Mission of Mexico, particularly our Ambassador Hector Vasconcelos and Alicia Buenrostro, where is she? Down there. And to tell you that
Porque si
we
no
are
está
very
bien conectado.
interested in having a dialogue with you because we believe that human mobility has become a highest priority in all parts of the world. And we want to show that this region, the Americas, and most particularly our region, has done tremendous efforts to, I would say, to move towards a secure, safe, humanitarian human mobility. And of course, we are experimenting unprecedented migrant flows. And I think we need to have a discussion and a conversation about how we can do this together, because Mexico has a very special, I would say, situation, because we are a country of origin, transit, destiny, and return. So we do have, and we also have a mix between refugees and migrants. We have discussed this quite a bit with some of you, that sometimes we don't distinguish between migrants and refugees, and we should. And of course, our basic reality, let's say, is that we don't believe that migrants, first of all, they are people that are seeking for opportunities. Migrants are people seeking for job opportunities, and also refugees are looking for, I would say, better future. So in this occasion, what I would like to suggest we do is we would like to discuss with you I would say, 4 points that we believe are the essence of this reality. First of all, migration is a phenomenon, it's not a problem. It happens all over the world. And we would like to address the structural causes of migration. What is causing the migration? Is it poverty, inequality, violence? What are the structural causes of irregular migration, by the way? Because maybe you don't know this information, but between the US and Mexico, we have 1,000 crossings daily, regular crossings daily, because our trade is so big that we have $1.5 million per minute trading. So our crossings, regular crossings between the US and Mexico is 1,000 every day. So what we're talking here is about the irregular migration, but we need to understand what are the structural causes. Secondly, what are those external economic and political factors that are exacerbating irregular migration? And we have some examples. Thirdly, what is the humanitarian management of these mixed flows? What can we do? And one of them is and the fourth one is the one we are pushing for, is how to expand and diversify regular pathways for labor mobility. We think that all of the migrants are looking for labor opportunities. I think we are in a region where opportunities and economic opportunities are there. So we have walked a clear path marked by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and we believe that we can certainly, what we want is to have and to make sure that migration is a choice, is an option. and not an obligation. So that's why I'm so pleased that we have with us today the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. We have made a great partnership with you, Filippo. We feel very proud about the things we have made. We have made a fantastic arrangement with Honduras. We will tell you later on what have done. We have collaborated very closely with Colombia, with Venezuela, with Cuba, and we are working together to make sure that we can address this. And I also thank the International Organization for Migration, because if we think together about how to solve this problem, I think we will be better off. So without further ado, I have to give the floor to two people that I know have to leave very early, and then I will pass the floor to Andrew Steele. But I know Foreign Minister Murillo has to run. So before you run away, we want to hear you. And then, of course, Filippo Grandi, and I hope you, Eduardo, can stay with us for a little longer. All right. So, please, Silva.
Alicia, thank you for convening this fantastic meeting, and for leading this meeting today on irregular migration and mainly about human mobility, I would say, which is a phenomenon of the development of humanity. We need to make this migration safe, regular, or that is really done in orderly way. There are some structural causes. I will go through your points that you outlined. I'm first saying that uh, yesterday we have very good conversation with that was convened by the United States Secretary Blinken about migration. And what I notice is that many countries are doing a lot in terms of, like, if you measure in the last 2 years, the progress is significant. And I think that this hemisphere is a model, and we need to continue making some innovations. Colombia is moving in that direction because we specialize Colombia in welcoming migrants because of the challenge of Venezuela and the historical relation between Colombia and Venezuela. They welcome Colombians in the past. Now we are like doing the same, and we learn a lot with the support of the entire international community. We created this center for, we call Integrate, for the integration of migrants with the support, a lot of support from the international community, learning from the experience of other countries. Also, we are advancing in providing services, but at the same time, we realize that the contribution of Venezuelan migrants in Colombia is very significant. There are some studies done by some of your organizations that show that, for example, we are receiving like $500 million dollars from taxes that are paying by those migrants. So it's not just like the cost, as we said, of having migrants in Colombia. So that's something that Colombia is doing. Also, Colombia is collaborating with the Offices of Safe Mobility. The Office of Safe Mobility is very important. We would like to see more people process in those safe mobility offices, but it's a good starting point. And as you mentioned, Alicia, the possibility, you were talking about structural causes. One of them is related to people looking for economic opportunities, not necessarily, obviously, some of them are related to political issues, but looking for economic opportunities. So, labor mobility and possibility of at least in a orderly way to allow those people to pursue those opportunities is very important. And we would like to learn from you, Mexico, from others that are really implementing those programs. The other is investment in those communities. Uh, President Petro have been very straightforward, saying that we need more support for development in those areas for people to stay in their communities because this is what they would like to do and have the political and security conditions for people to stay there. And in terms of the external economics and political factors, obviously, and this is something that we need to discuss, is how we can harmonize the system for having humane mobility of people in the hemisphere, because we have some kind of differential between the regime in different countries. So the lesson that we have learned need to be documented, systematized, and applied in different countries. So That's in terms of political and policy factors, and also economic factors. It's like there are some areas that are the origin of migration that need some economic support. We are very straightforward when we talk about Cuba and Venezuela, that the sanctions is not the way to continue, because that create problems, and that's something that we need to discuss in a sincere way. Uh, in addition to that, in terms of humanitarian aspect of this, Colombia really would like to continue welcoming migrants. President Petro is talking about he believe in the Latin America and the Caribbean citizenship, that you can move around and really contribute to different countries. So in our presidencia pro tempore of the LA declaration, that's something that we would like to put more on the table. And we need more civil society in this discussion. I said that in our meeting in Guatemala, and I continue saying this. We need to have more civil society participating directly in this discussion, also in the decision-making process. That's that we really wanted to say, but we are very excited that we see like a renewed excitement about responding to the needs of migrants in the Western Hemisphere, and that's very important. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you. Introduce the rest of the session. Taking into account, I don't know, Filippo, when do you have to leave?
No.
You can stay. That's great, because I want you to listen to Reina and to Carlos Fernandez. I think it's important to hear the government, then, of course, the organizations. So, Andrew.
Well, thank you, and thank you for Minister Bárcena for the invitation to be here. And I just want to echo something before I do the presentations that Foreign Minister Murillo has just said, which is that Latin America and the Caribbean really has been an area of experimentation, right? And I think I see High Commissioner Grandi agreeing with this. I mean, it really is. Latin America and the Caribbean had the largest proportional increase in migration between 2010 and 2022 of any region in the world, even between 2010 and 2020. And it really is a region that has found ways of welcoming people. Colombia stands at the forefront of this, of course, but many other countries as well in situations of displacement. There are quite a few legal pathways, labor pathways that have been developed, mobility agreements. You spoke about that, Minister Murillo. That there are actually at least 5 regional mobility agreements in the Americas that are particularly important, where countries have agreed to allow people to move under certain criteria, among them, some of them quite broad, and quite broad in protection and finding new ways of approaching protection with support of UNHCR and with support of IOM on the migration side. And it is also a leader in terms of getting ahead of the curve on institutions. The LA Declaration, which the minister just mentioned, is, of course, one of the important tools. The Los Angeles Declaration, the Palenque process, which Minister Bárcena has been involved in, the Quito process, of course, R4V led by UNHCR and IOM, and I could go on. But it is notable that countries have also risen to the occasion by creating channels for some of the needed dialogue around this. And finally, before I start introducing people, let me just salute Minister Bárcena, who led the discussion in the Mexican government on the Mexican model of human mobility. This is, I think it's fair to say, the first time that the Mexican government has had a policy that is about migration in all its aspects, which is, for Mexico as a country of people who have left and who has an active diaspora, people who return to Mexico, people who are passing through, and people who choose to stay and live in Mexico, including those with protection needs. And this really looks at all those aspects and what Mexico wants out of migration. I think this is an incredible effort, and it's something, I think many countries in the hemisphere could actually learn from, perhaps including our own, by the way, in terms of thinking strategically about how you manage migration. So with that, let me introduce a stellar panel. We've already heard from Foreign Minister Luis Gilberto Murillo. And let me, I think we're turning next to Foreign Minister Eduardo Enrique Reina, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Honduras. Minister Reina.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Alice, for this initiative, Alicia. And we'd like to recognize and underline the big efforts and the leadership also of President López Obrador concerning the issue of migration and the meeting that he held, the summit in Palenque, where different Latin American and Caribbean head of states visit Mexico to reach some position and unified vision of migration in Latin American and the Caribbean. Mexico has developed this model of human mobility that is a great example, that's something that a good practice that we may emulate. That has served as a reference throughout the region, advocating for safe, orderly, and regular migration. These efforts have been important not only for Mexico, but also for neighboring countries, including Honduras. In Honduras, we have also done some work in developing a national law on internal displacement that is very important, with the support of many agencies, among them the UNHCR and the National Organization of Migration and some other bodies and cooperation agencies. And I would like to also to give a special recognition on the process we have seen in reducing irregular migration from Honduras to Mexico and the United States. The number of Honduras apprehended in the southern border of the U.S. has decreased by 28% in 2024 compared to 2023. In this trend continues, Honduras will close the year with significantly lower apprehensions figures, reflecting the positive impact of the measure that we have implemented together. We attribute these advances in part to regional efforts in which Mexico has played a key role. The coordinated works between our nations, along with the use of innovative tools such as the CBP-1 application, has allowed for better control of migration flow, since it allows them to request asylum in the United States from Mexico, and they are granted an appointment facilitating the orderly processing of thousands of people. In August 2024 alone, more than 44,000 people used this application to provide advance information and schedule appointments at port of entry, which accumulated a total of approximately 830,000 appointments scheduled in the implementation in January 2023. Likewise, the Mexican cooperation programs that are very important for President López Obrador, but also for Honduras, showing life of a future and the building the future. Training opportunities have helped in Honduras more than probably 100,000 Honduran people, directed for them not to leave the country and to promote production, particularly in rural and agricultural areas. A work visa program was also launched with Mexico, which allows for the orderly safe migration of migrants, giving them the opportunity to work regularly in various product sectors, which up to now has been a very good result. We have the same with Spain, a very good program that has increased and practically doubled the number of Hondurans that goes to Spain to work in agricultural issues. From 9 months, and the people are regularly coming back to Honduras almost in a 98% basis. So that's a very good results in this program, and we'll try to increase these possibilities in other areas like health services and other matters. Also, we are working in the same with Canada and the US with temporal visas. Honduras is also working, for example, to implement possibilities to provide support for example, in the case of Spain, to provide the government to provide the return tickets of the workers, and in direct action with the private sector. Also, we're doing an exemption of the visa taxes for Hondurans that will go in these temporal visa regimes practically to the US. And we also have initiated actions with positive results in the immigration issues to work directly with consulates with Mexico and Guatemala, and to save strength and to have more human resources that may be directed to support people. The time taken to complete family reunification was reduced, achieving this within the first 24 to 48 hours of the most, particularly for children coming in families as migrants. Irregular migrants are also working together in the issue of unaccompanied children to the southern border of the U.S. In fact, President Xiomara Castro has visited the border with Secretary Mayorkas in order to foresee how we may work together in different issues. As for migrants entering Honduras en route to Mexico or the US, this year the figure has risen to almost 1,157,000 people. Is the largest in many years, with almost 50 different nationalities coming to Honduras, not only Latin American nationals or Caribbean, but also people from Eastern countries, for example, in middle countries, Eastern country in Africa. Alicia, I think this achievement demonstrates that the power of working together and the need to continue strengthening our alliance. Honduras is committed to continue to strengthen actions to reduce irregular migration. We will work hand in hand with Mexico and other partners and colleagues. Also, we have developed a new center for attention of irregular migrants in the southern border with Nicaragua, with a focus on human rights. This is very important. This with the support also with the UN High Commissioner of Refugees and other agencies. So we're trying to change the view to dignify in a way or another the protection of human rights, but also work together and also trying to work in the root causes of migration, trying to develop new programs, mainly to promote the return to agriculture and the return to investment and small business in Honduras. Thank you, Alicia, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Reina, and I think great steps that have been taken by the Honduran government on the issue of migration. I would like to introduce now the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, Carlos Fernández de Cosío Domínguez.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. And thank you, Minister Alicia, for convening this meeting. As Minister Alicia correctly said, migration is not a problem, it's a human phenomenon. That, of course, in history has had changing causes and changing dynamics. But there is a natural trend.
Recording in progress.
Sorry, yes.
Does that mean anything? It's a natural trend that of people wanting to move from more humble economic conditions to an environment where there are better economic conditions. And it's a phenomenon that poses challenges to the receiving countries, to the transit countries, and also to the countries of origin. But we should not be surprised for this phenomenon to grow as the economy becomes more interrelated, more globalized, and international interaction as a whole. In Palenque, the meeting that we held in Palenque, Mexico, we spoke about the push factors. Many of them, as we've said here, the root causes of migration. Many of them endogenous, but some of them foreign and artificial. In the case of Cuba, of course, we speak about economic coercive measures that our country suffers, and that this is an artificial push of migration, in addition to all the other normal and typical sources. And there are also the pull factors. But we also have to look at the other side of the coin. Migration also poses opportunities, among others, to the countries that receive it, the countries of destination of migrants. They are human resources. They contribute to the workforce. They contribute to productivity. They contribute to economic growth. But at the same time, our analysis is incomplete if we don't look at the impact sometimes that this has in the countries of origin. When there's a drain of qualified workforce, of professionals, what typically we've called brain drain, and it's typical and it's logical for people who have skills, who have professional capacities to want to explore the potential of their capacity in other countries, many times at the expense of the societies that they leave behind. And this poses a challenge for developing countries because it contributes to reproduce the conditions of underdevelopment and the conditions of more challenging economic reality in the country where they are. We cannot put a stop to it, but we cannot ignore that this factor exists and that sometimes the pull factors in the countries of destination have an impact on the situation for developing countries. I believe that this effort and this discussion led by Mexico and other countries should continue. And we should look at it with the reality that it has in our region. Because we see movement from nations to nation, from region to region, but also inside our countries. The same phenomenon that one sees in North America and Canada or in the United States of people abandoning cities or urban areas that were very prosperous economically 30, 40 years ago and are moving to other areas is the same reality one sees when people moving from developing countries to developed countries where they see there's greater opportunities. Just to put an example, there's a lot of migration from Latin America and the Caribbean to the state of Florida. There's also a lot of migration from several cities in the United States also to the state of Florida because of better economic conditions. And one can make an analogy of both realities. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister. That was incredibly helpful reflections. Before we're going to go to the second part of the panel, let me just recognize two other governments in the room. Alexandra Hiles here on behalf of the Government of Canada and Marcela Escobari here on behalf of the Government of the United States as well. The role of the United Nations systems. The UN system has been particularly active on migration and protection issues in the hemisphere. And so it is my great pleasure to turn this over to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Guerrero.
Thank you, Andrew, and Alicia, Minister. Thank you very much for hosting us here, and it was very inspiring to listen to the previous speakers. The countries represented here have all been allies in the efforts that we in the UN, IOM and UNHCR in particular, have made to tackle this issue. And I would also like to support what was said earlier, meaning that this is a region in which a lot of interesting things are happening in this complicated area. And I think that both IOM, I don't want to speak for Ugo, but she will also, I hope, confirm, we have a worldview of this. And so we can compare very well with what is happening elsewhere, and it compares favorably. It's true that in my many visits, including to your countries, I see a lot of misery. I remember some, encounters with, that's the wrong word, some meetings with people on the way, on the move in Honduras. Last time I was there, in Colombia, in other places, a lot of misery. There's a lot of misery associated with these movements, but also an incredible amount of opportunities that are being created by courageous programs. So thank you for doing that. I don't need to tell you much about the nature of this movement. Maybe it's useful to recap a few points. That the patterns, not only the movement is big, the 500,000 people that went through the Darien last year, and it's going to be high again this year, although perhaps a little less. But not only the size is big, the patterns are complicated. There are many routes. We estimate that the people crossing these routes are now of at least 100 nationalities, including many from outside the Americas, so Africa, Asia, and so forth. And this, of course, means that it is an incredibly prosperous market for smugglers and traffickers, and an increasing. And this, of course, means not only a lot of complications for states on the road, on the routes, but it also means a lot of risks and challenges for people that are on those routes. Now, of course, you already all mentioned that the reasons why people move are diverse. You can roughly group them into some causes: conflict, instability, violations on human rights. These are the people that we would call refugees. And may I make a big plea, because we always talk about migration route. These are really migration and refugee routes. I know I'm not going to be fussy on that, but please just remember it when you talk, because there is a difference between the two, although those people that move for economic hardship, opportunities, as was mentioned, move along the same routes, often have the same risks, and often share both root causes are mixed together. And of course, let's not forget, even in your region, the growing impact of climate change on these migrations, on these routes. This is just to flag and to remember. So the big challenge for all of you, who am I to tell you, but the big challenges for states is how to continue to provide asylum, protection to people that are refugees that cannot be returned to their countries, whilst at the same time managing these movements in an orderly manner. I heard from all of you, I hear all the time, let's make migration regular. I couldn't agree more. Remember, however, that you have that refugee component. Sorry, I don't mean to be provocative, but refugees by definition are irregular movers because they don't choose, as Alicia said in the beginning, they don't choose to move. They're forced to move by circumstance. So it's something that is quite a big challenge. Now, the responses, as we all know, and as everywhere, have been mixed. In many countries, the reflex, and this is quite natural, I think, states have an instinctive reflex, first of all, to look at their borders. Are our borders secure? And that is, of course, legitimate. It's even a duty of countries to protect their own populations. The only point I make when governments say this to me is that that's fine, do it, but it's not enough. It won't solve the problem, and it won't address some of the complexity of these movements anyway. But what I think is important, and you have already, many of you mentioned it, is that in the region, more and more, you are looking beyond your borders. Believe me, this is the fundamental difference with most other regions where states are almost obsessively concentrating only on their border. But here, although you have different contexts, different challenges and pressures, you're all trying to work together. We in our small way, we and UNHCR several years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, launched this MIRPS initiative in Mexico and Central America that had, I can see now that initiatives like the Los Angeles Declaration, like the Palenque Initiative, really are, are much broader and more important, but the principles are the same. Working together to ensure the protection of those who need it, look at root causes, regularize migration, create pathways, etc., etc. So this is very important. And of course, the UN, particularly but not exclusively through UNHCR and IOM, supports very much this approach. We call this approach, Amy Pope and Hugo will maybe talk about that. IOM and UNHCR call this approach route-based approach. I think in the Los Angeles Declaration, it's called hemispheric approach. And I think that this is the way to look at it. You don't solve the problem in one place only, but you have to look at the whole route. Of course, the most challenging, the root causes, but also transit countries, what to do to stabilize, to offer layers of opportunities on the way. And opportunities can be like, I was just talking to Alicia earlier, in Mexico, both IOM and UNHCR have fairly solid programs together with the government to offer employment to people on the move. And this is in demand by the private sector. So opportunities of that nature that are stabilizing. So you have, people like this don't need to move to dangerous routes, but of course also opportunities to move safely onward. And this is the Safe Mobility Office's initiative that was largely driven by the US, but we are now in Colombia, we're in Costa Rica, in Ecuador, in Guatemala. So these are still small. They need to be scaled, these examples, but these are examples of route-based approach to address a very complex phenomenon. And I think this is very positive. One more point on opportunities, echoing also what Canciller Minister Murillo said earlier. what some countries in South America have done, in particular in South America, have done to regularize the presence of enormous numbers of refugees and migrants, Venezuelans, but not only Venezuelans, through regularization processes has been amazing. And Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, and other countries now following suit. That's very important, because through that regularization, you offer opportunities, you open labor market access to services, and at the same time, the state has an advantage of a better control over the population. So it's a bit of a win-win, if you wish. I understand it's enormously challenging, but that's why we have pledged support. The UN has pledged support to countries doing these things, essentially, in many ways, through humanitarian assistance, but that's very small. But essentially by helping mobilize large contributions of the World Bank, of the Inter-American Development Bank, that are linked to migration and refugees through special financial instruments that these institutions have created. So all in all, a multiplicity of opportunities, as I call it, beyond controls, still very small compared to the size of the phenomenon, but I think that this is the direction in which we need to look. I want to conclude only with a little point almost of information, but we at UNHCR are convinced that the Americas have a lot to tell and teach the rest of the world in terms of migration and refugee management. And in the refugee protection sphere in particular, this is a long tradition that goes back to the end of dictatorships, to democratization, to conflicts that happen in the 80s, to resolution of conflicts. We've been very intimately involved with the history of all these phases. And, 40 years ago, in Cartagena, Colombia, a declaration was signed by Latin American countries, the famous Cartagena Declaration, that is perhaps the most advanced model of regional cooperation in protection matters. It's the 40th anniversary, and in Santiago de Chile, on the 11th of December, we will have a big celebration, and we hope that all the governments in the region will be well represented to mark also symbolically the advances, the opportunities, and highlight the challenges that remain to be faced.
Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Always thoughtful and insightful. I really appreciate it. Turning now to the Deputy Director General of IOM, Ugochi Daniels. Ugo.
Hi. Oh, no, I don't mean hi. I mean excellencies. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to be here. I first of all have to express gratitude to the government of Mexico and to you, Minister Bárcena, in particular for convening this important and very timely event. Much credit goes to you for your leadership over the years to promote safe, regular, and orderly migration at the national level, at the regional level. And Mexico is one of the champion countries of the Global Compact on migration. So we're deeply appreciative. I'll also use the opportunity to thank all of the member states around the table. We're extremely pleased that the pact that was adopted recognizes the contribution of migration to sustainable development. And thank you also, Minister Bárcena, for starting off with the phrase, migration is a phenomenon and not a problem. If all the meetings I have attended over the past few days had started with that, I would have been thrilled. So for many of you who have had the opportunity, the honor of meeting my boss, Director General Amy Pope, the force of nature that she is, will know that facilitating pathways for migration is at the heart of IOM's whole of government and whole of society approach. And it's one of our core institutional priorities. So our aim is to ensure that migration and migrants' needs are considered across policy areas, law, regulations from health to education, and from fiscal policies to trade if we are really going to achieve the full potential of migration for the SDGs. So this, of course, aligns with commitments that all of you have made through landmark agreements like the LA Declaration, and previous speakers have already spoken about the Declaration of Palenque. As I started off with, this meeting is particularly relevant, and labor migration in this hemisphere has taken on particular urgency given the unprecedented levels of irregular migration on one hand and labor shortages together with the opportunities for market complementarity on the other. And the best way to reduce the risk of exploitation and ensuring protection for migrants' rights, including labor rights and access to essential services, is regular pathways for labor migration. Now, of course, we know the benefits in terms of skills, strengthening the labor force, investment, and cultural diversity, but it also advances integration into communities, it boosts local economy, and of course, improves the lives of communities in their countries of origin, transit, and destination. In summary, it connects people, goods, services, knowledge, and innovation. And we know that labor shortages have been a challenge in the hemisphere. In the US, there are 8.5 million job openings, but only 6.5 million people who are unemployed to fill them. And in Mexico, there are 1.3 million unfilled vacancies across a range of businesses from manufacturing, trade, electricity, water, gas, and agriculture. These sectors are the backbone of any economy. But here, migrants offer the solution, making significant contributions, both high and low-skilled occupations. They are not the problem. And in fact, developing countries, generally, the contribution from migrants to GDP is about 7%. But we want to see the benefits of migration not only from the perspective of what migrants bring in, and understanding the relationship between migration and development is complex because the political, social, and economic processes of the destination countries also determine how, where, and when migration occurs. If migration is poorly governed, it will have negative impacts on development as well. So we know there's much to be done to make regular pathways inclusive and accessible. So how can we achieve this? We know that it's essential that both countries of origin and destination share responsibility and show clear political will to match migration policy to their labor market needs. And possible solutions have already been spoken of, such as regularizing the status of migrant workers. And one really good example is the recent adoption of a national regularization program for Venezuelans, migrants living in Argentina. And other solutions may be humanitarian visas, private sponsorships, family reunification, and temporary work permits, as spoken by His Excellency, the representative of Honduras. Working in partnership is critical, and that's what this meeting here represents. We need broad partnerships that also include the civil society, the private sector, the migrants, and the communities of origin. And so in June of this year, the government of Mexico and IOM hosted the first hemispheric meeting on regular pathways in Mexico City with 30 governments across the hemisphere, the EU, as well as representatives from the private sector, multilateral organizations, civil society, and academia. So this is a historic step in addressing the current challenges, but also maximizing the opportunities. And it's key to position regular pathways as a core priority. So for our part, IOM, with our long and solid experience in this region, thanks to many of our partners around the table, will continue to support states and employers. And also in our role as the convener of the UN Network on Migration is to support countries, to support you in expanding, enhancing, and diversifying regular pathways for labor migration. And we do this ensuring complementarity between the Global Compact on Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees. And so looking ahead, we have the Global Compact for Migration Regional Review for the Americas in March next year. And it's going to be a key moment for all of you, your countries, member states, to take stock of progress, challenges, and lesson learned. Now, I started off by saying it's wonderful that Minister Bárcena set us off by recognizing that migration is a phenomenon and not a problem, and I also said how I wished all meetings that I've attended at the GA started that way. At the same time, I don't want to underestimate what the challenge is. So the World Economic Forum Global Risk Survey lists how people around the world see what the threats are, what is the greatest risk. And I was sure that the impact of climate was going to be the greatest risk. It wasn't, it was second. The number one risk was misinformation and disinformation. And if there is one issue on which there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation, it is migration. So let's not underestimate the efforts and political will that is required to achieve everything that I have spoken about and to achieve the sustainable development goals in your countries. And that's why meetings like this are so important. So I end by thanking the government of Mexico again for bringing us all together. And I look forward with all of you, and I'm saying this on behalf of Director General Amy Pope, a path to the future where migrant workers are recognized as agents of positive change, where labor migration is a catalyst for economic growth and development, and that it benefits everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director General Daniels. I really appreciate your notion of migration as a possibility, but the need to build those pathways that allow it to take place. And always a pleasure to hear you frame migration that way. Before we go into the discussion, by the way, we are exactly on time, which is amazing. Congratulations to everyone who spoke here. Let me turn it back to the High Commissioner for 30 seconds because he may need to step out early.
Yes, I just asked Andrew the permission to speak for 30 seconds. I think before I go, Alicia, I hope on behalf of everybody, give you big thanks, not only for hosting us here and the ambassador too, but for all that you have done in this and many other areas of our common efforts. You know, I've had the privilege of working with you in your many capacities before, including inside the UN. And since you've been a foreign minister in Mexico, I have seen huge advances and progress in the debate around this very complicated issue. And you've always been clear, politically savvy, courageous, outspoken, and creative. And I think we need more leaders like you. We wish you all the best because now you will turn around the whole discussion on climate change, of course. We're very happy, but I really felt that I couldn't go without giving you a big personal and hopefully collective thanks.
Thank you. That, I think that was a collective thank you, actually, from everybody. I think that I can affirm for the minutes, by the way, was a collective thank you from everyone at this table. Thank you, Commissioner. Let's open up for discussion. We have now heard the initial interventions, but we have people who are very knowledgeable around the table. Those who've spoken can dive in again if they want. But let's open up for a conversation for a few minutes. Others who want to speak. Marcelo, you've been volunteered, I believe, by the Mexican government. So, Marcela, great to have you here. I recognized you earlier representing the White House and the U.S. government.
Great. No, thank you so much. And let me reiterate the thanks to Alicia, to Foreign Minister, really for your leadership on this topic. I think about the LA Declaration, and it was a great meeting yesterday. And really, you have encompassed the spirit and the actions behind it. And for that, we're very grateful, because it has made a difference for, I think, hundreds of thousands of people. Together, we have worked very closely to try to change that risk calculus for people before they leave, before they put their lives in the hands of smugglers, and really not only help them avail themselves of lawful pathways, but increase the number of those pathways throughout the region. And we know, for those of us who have studied this, is that as they say, the $100 bill on the ground, or the $1 billion bill on the ground, is the labor mobility. And you have been an incredible champion of that. And I think you are, in a way, creating the momentum so that we continue to really expand on this issue. The vision that we have, and that you have said, and that you want to implement in Mexico, and we should do as a region, is this, that as many have said, there are labor needs in the world. There's labor demand and supply. If we can disintermediate the smugglers, it's a huge opportunity for every country, And as a colleague of mine says, knowledge travels faster in brains than into brains. And mobility, the human mobility, is not only going to provide opportunity, but really is the binding constraint to growth, as the structural changes of economies are happening so fast. And I think what you and this group have done is, and Foreign Minister Murillo too, is use your bully pulpit, use the fact that you speak to the masses to change the narrative about migration. And that takes courage. And I think we need to do it more broadly, because there's two myths about migration that we need to continue to work to dispel. One is, as Ms. Daniel mentioned, migration is not a cost. It can be a benefit, and we know that it is a benefit if well managed. But the other one, which I hear from every government when we talk about labor and migration, is like, but I have unemployment in my country. And that's also a absolute falsehood, because by creating opportunity to migrants, by allowing them, to come and help create industries, you will create more jobs. It feels counterintuitive, but it really isn't. And I think, your willingness to be a voice for that, but for all of us to dispel these two things, to really harmonize the system, I think is the next challenge that we have to really create these labor pathways at a much greater scale, which is what we need. So thank you, and thank you for this forum.
Thank you, Marcela. That was great. Thank you for your leadership also on the Los Angeles Declaration. She played a very instrumental role. So, others that want to join the conversation. I'm looking at Alexandra Piles.
Is the microphone on? One of my lack of skills in this life is ever turning on one of these microphones. So I wanted to echo the thanks for bringing together this meeting, Excellencies. This was an incredible conversation, and it's left me with a lot reflect on. I also wanted to give Canada's congratulations to Mexico for this really comprehensive and holistic framework that you're putting forward. I would echo my colleague from the United States' comments that this is forward-leaning, it's innovative, and I think it's where the conversation needs to go on migration. So thank you very much. I also want to echo various comments from this discussion that the meeting yesterday, the LA Declaration meeting yesterday, was notable for the amount of progress that has been made, tangible progress. I've had the opportunity to attend 3 ministerials for the LA Declaration, and the strides that we've taken as a group really are remarkable. Canada, of course, is delighted to still be leading action packages on asylum and resettlement, working with Mexico on the labor mobility action package. And I would also echo my colleague from IOM's comments that labor mobility and labor migration is an important and untapped, in many ways, movement that I think will be a great challenge for all of us. Challenge is actually the wrong word. I correct myself. Opportunity for all of us to really seize. And I finally will walk away and bring back to Washington and Ottawa the statement that migration is a phenomenon and not a problem, because I think those are wise words and also reflect Canada's views on migration going forward. So thank you all for convening this discussion.
Alexandra, and I mean, I think it's worth noting that many of us, I know you have your stresses and strains on migration in Canada, but many of us look to Canada as an example of how migration can be managed in a thoughtful way. You even manage the crises in a thoughtful way, but you also have always thought of it as an element of economic development, right? And I think that's something the rest of us could learn from. I've heard actually Canciller Bárcena talk about this as well. Canciller Bárcena talk about this, that it is something sometimes that happens. Sometimes you don't choose depending where you're located, but it's still an opportunity, right? And still you have to figure out, but you've done a great job in setting up your migration system to really start with that and then manage crises as they happen. Turning, Marshall, I know you've done an enormous amount of work on this, and you're one of the great experts on immigration in the United States as well as in the region. So,
well, that's way too kind. I'm sure there are many who would dispute that, but I do appreciate it, and Canciller, just such a pleasure, and I echo everything that everyone has already said about your leadership and just the way you've approached this issue from a very pragmatic, very solutions-oriented frame where the opportunities are what you're driving at, rather than trying to kind of paper over the challenges, which are real as well. So anyway, it's been a fantastic year and a half to work with you and your team, Martin and the rest of the team. And so thank you. I guess the main things, when I step back and kind of look at the challenge, especially this hemispheric challenge, which is what we're focused on. But I think it's the points I'm going to make probably have salience beyond the hemisphere. It's that what we need to be focused on are those models that are replicable and scalable. And we are trying to, we've been working with companies, with subnational governments, with the Mexican government and Colombian government to try to identify what are those best models, what can work the best. And I do think it comes back, I land in the space that probably the most important intervention is scaling labor pathways. When you think about the number of people who are on the move, when you think about the opportunity to create kind of win-win-win dynamics, it really is filling the labor shortages where they are. It's facilitating people to be able to get there. people who are hungry to work, people who are hungry to improve their own lives and seek those opportunities. That to me feels like where we collectively should be putting a lot of our attention, effort, et cetera. So just echoing what many of you have already kind of alluded to. The second thing I want to be sure that we don't forget is that where the rubber meets the road for all of this is in cities. And while we have a lot of conversations, and of course, given the nature of this convening, these are national level and dynamics and policies that we're talking about. But we just launched on Monday with IOM and with CAF, the Latin American Development Bank, a Mayors of the Americas task force on migration. And the goal is really to try to create a new vision where the people who are forced to deal with all of the aspects of migration have a voice at the table, a stronger voice. Where the mayor of Bogota was one of the founding members at the launch. The incoming mayor of Mexico City is also very interested and wants to join. And I think Will just couldn't come because she hasn't quite got there yet. But I don't want to forget that this isn't just a national level. And in fact, sometimes the national level dynamics, politics, perspectives can be more challenging given the shifting political winds. But the mayors and people on the ground, they can't avoid grappling with the dynamics, and they are ready and willing to seize the opportunities presented. And so that working together isn't just across the region. I think it's not just horizontal, but it's also vertical.
That's great. Thank you, Marshall. Really appreciate that. And really appreciate all the work you do at the Emerson Collective, also across the hemisphere. Marcela, you had an introduction that you were doing.
Since we are in the spirit of bold people, I wanted to pass the mic to my colleague Jen Davis. But because she's going to be more modest, I just want to kind of frame a little bit of her new role, how excited I am that she has come on board to not only run the Safe Mobility Initiative, but to really, in a very impressive way, expand it. And only a few minutes ago, after a lot of work from everybody at this table, the White House fact sheet on the Elite Declaration just went live. And you're going to see what my colleague Alexandra has mentioned, that the list is really long and compelling. We were really proud to be able to announce the $686 million. Thank you. And a big part, or around 83 million of that, is related to the Safe Mobility Initiative that now encompasses labor neighbors. And Jen has a really ambitious view, and Mexico is front and center there. So I would love for you to tell us what we have in the planning that we just announced in writing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcela. Madam Minister, it is un verdadero honor estar aquí con usted. Yo soy un chilanga en mi corazón. Viví en México. Gracias por invitarme. I would welcome talking about safe mobility and labor mobility because, like all of you, I could not agree more, and I am so passionate about labor mobility as a true key to regularizing migration, to giving people dignity of work, to boosting all of our economies and our opportunities and what we learn together so that we can have brain gain across the hemisphere. And so I have, with Marcela and our team, with Lindsay, tried to think through ways that we could promote labor migration in the hemisphere. One of the most important parts of it for us is, of course, working with countries on the visa regimes through which people can lawfully work within the hemisphere, in the receiving countries. and also systems to ensure that labor migrants are protected, that there's portability in their visas, so that they have built-in protections when they come to a new country. And we have started important conversations here at UNGA this year on working with countries to pilot through our Safe Mobility platform and through work that USAID has done to pilot programs with receiving countries to receive migrants from the hemisphere who are in search of a circular labor migration opportunity. And would just need it to be facilitated, and we can lead together as nations to facilitate just showing proof of concept. And then each country can have its own capacity and its own relationships and its own nationals that it can receive and skills match and train. And I just think if we could really give our passion and our focus to labor mobility in the coming years and regularizing those pathways, we will be doing such a service to our countries, to migrants and refugees, and to all of our economies and security. So I really look forward to working with the new administration, Madam Minister, and with all of your countries on these exciting developments. And I really see great future for it. So thank you again for all you've done. Thank you. Thank you.
And great to have Jen working on the Safe Mobility Initiative. Any of the panelists want to add to what they've already said, or anyone else at this table who wants to make an intervention?
Andrew.
Yes. Ambassador, how are you? Great to see you again, Ambassador Vasconcelos, and thank you so much for hosting us.
Very, very good to see you again here. I would simply like to mention that the whole issue of migration is so important for this mission that we have begun to work on a draft proposal that it could eventually become perhaps a resolution concerning specifically human rights of migrants. And this is the central element in our work at this mission. And I hope that in the next few weeks, we will be able to share it with all of you, this draft document, discuss it, and see if we can work together towards its presentation to the United Nations.
Oh, excellent. It's very exciting news, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Others who, yes, Hugo.
So maybe two things. First, in response to the last remark by His Excellency in terms of a resolution on human rights of migrants, we would be very keen to support that effort, building on the numerous resolutions that are existing, and how we can strengthen not just the resolution, but the actual implementation of it. And also thank you for raising the point about human rights of migrants, because it's wonderful that we're all around the table talking about the opportunities of labor migration, labor mobility, contributions to economies. The reality is, and I say this all the time, that the smugglers and traffickers aren't waiting. So whatever we are not doing now, they are already doing. And technology has enabled them to do it much faster. And people in vulnerable situations are desperate, because why else would you put your life in the hand of your future in the hand of a smuggler or a trafficker? And I say this also recognizing that last year was the deadliest year on record for migrants in terms of loss of life. So the discussions that we are having are very, very important for the lives and dignity of people. And because one of the best ways to disrupt the business model of traffickers is regular pathways, because they work and thrive and have a multi-billion-dollar industry on irregularity. So thank you very much for the opportunity to have this discussion, but to also recognize really what is at stake here if we don't act, if we don't take this discussion to the scale needed for the opportunities that exist, but also the challenges that are there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director General. Thank you. Why don't we turn now to Secretary Bárcena, if you don't mind. I'm going to innovate on the agenda with your permission, which is to ask you to present the Mexican model of human mobility. And I will again say, I think this was a Herculean effort, but a really important effort. And if I can be politically incorrect, which I should not be during the UN General Assembly week, but I will anyway. It's such a distinguished group of people here. But but I've written this before, so you've heard me say this before. I've always worried that for Mexico, migration was often seen as part of the bilateral relationship with the United States first and foremost, and then sort of whatever, And I think one of the huge evolutions here is recognizing that diplomacy matters, that it will always be part of the relationship with the United States, it'll be part of the relationship with Central America, but Mexico has its own national interests and its own national values in how it deals with migration. I think all countries should think that way, right? I mean, that is, there's always realpolitik, there's always the neighborhood to deal with, but ultimately it really is about national interests and national values, and this is the reflection I think we see here. So, Secretary, turning over to you.
Well, thank you so much. One of the most important parts of this Mexican model on human mobility is that we wanted to change the narrative. We wanted it not to be only a matter between the US and Mexico, but to really see it as a regional problem, and a problem that I'm going to show you why it's already that way. So shall we go? Who's going to help me? Okay. So I know that you cannot read that and you shouldn't, but I'll tell you what are the principles here. First of all, I think what we wanted to do is to bring all the Mexican authorities around the table, because migration is not a matter only of one ministry or one secretariat. It had to be a collective action. So there is an interministerial commission for comprehensive attention on migration matters that was established in 2021 due to the accident in Ciudad Juarez. And what happened is it turned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to coordinate this. So as soon as I came into the ministry 15 months ago, by the way, what I did is I put together this interministerial commission and brought the authorities to the table. And I'm talking about Organización, the Ministry of Interior, the military, everybody to the table, but the heads, not the representatives, the ones who can make the decisions. And that's the way we put together a strategy. And we went then to analyze together what are the actions that each one of us has to take, because indeed it is a matter of foreign policy, but at the end of the day, when the migrant comes in the border, it's a matter of interior. It's not only our responsibility, it's the responsibility of the Ministry of Interior and the whole people there. So when we talk about origin, for example, when we were talking about why is it a Mexico-US issue? Well, because 37 million people of Mexican origin live in the US. And of those, 10.7 were born in Mexico and 22.6 are for second and third generation. So I thought that the Americans would be interested in knowing that 26 million of Mexicans could vote, by the way, if they brought to the table. Then we are at transit because 2.5 million people went through Mexico in 2023, 2.5 million people. And we are a destination because 1.4 million people born in another country are living in Mexico right now. The next one, please. So our strategy has 4 pillars. Number 1 is how to take care of the Mexican communities abroad. This is these 37 million people that live basically in the US, not only. There are 40 million actually, but 37 in the US only. So I'm going to show you what we are trying to do for them. Secondly, is to go into the structural causes of migration and external factors. And here we are talking about how to go to the origins, and that's why we put together some programs with Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Colombia, Venezuela, but also how do we deal with the external political and economic factors, and as you say, politically incorrect maybe, but that is the economics of sanctions are not helping, at least in the migration problems of our region. Thirdly, precisely safe, orderly, and regular pathways for human mobility. That is labor, 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 labor. And that's where we went to the private sector. But we also analyzed the visa system we have with the US, H2A, H2B, the TN mission visas, and the program we have with Canada, which I think is very good program, the SWAP, which is the Seasonal Workers Agriculture program that we have with you, which is really very good. It has been already 50 years since we started with that program. And fourth, once the people are in our country, what do we do there? I mean, if we have 2.3 million people coming into Mexico, are they all of them going to stay in Mexico, or there are some people that we have to return to their home countries, and how do we do that? The next one, please. So this is 2.5 million irregular migrants encounters. The yellow show you which are no longer Mexicans. These are other nationalities that came through the Mexican border. At the beginning, they were almost only Mexicans, as you can see in 2000. But when we go to 2024, we are talking about Mexicans, yes, crossing to the US, but the majority are from other nationalities. Basically, 360,000 from Venezuela, 260,000 from Guatemala, 235,000 from Honduras, 156,000 from Colombia, 123,000 from Ecuador. Next one, please. Now, here is what we agree with the US, and I think this is very interesting. With the US, we had a big crisis in December 2023 because 12,500, more or less, people were encountered in the border, were crossing or trying to cross the US. And we had a big crisis because CBP, the authorities, the Border Patrol told us we don't have the capacity to handle 12,500 people in the border, so they closed the border. So the border was closed and 7 parts of the border, 7 crossings. And what happened is we had a big crisis on trade. Everybody complained. So we have several meetings with the US. So we agreed to put then a strategy in motion, a combined strategy between Mexico and the US. So the first thing we did is to disaggregate the numbers because 1,428 people come to the US already with a CBP-1 appointment. That is the CBP appointment that they can cross the US, but they were counted together with the 765 irregular migrants. So we said, no, let's divide the two because there's a different, when you get to the border, you go to El Paso, and you will see that there's one line that are for the CBP ones and the other line is for the irregular ones. Okay. So we went down, we almost pulled down the numbers 67%. But the other problem we had is that the CBP-1 appointments were given to the migrants or to the people that were applying to them in Mexico City, that is in the parallel 19. So already people came to the north to be able to apply. But we got a decision from the US government, which I am very grateful, because now the CBP can be they can apply in Tabasco and in Chiapas. And once a person has the appointment in hand, then we, the Mexican government, we take them to the border safely. So they don't have to go through the whole country with the smugglers and the extortions and the everybody. No, we take them in a bus to the border. And I think this can be really important in many ways. The next one, please. So El Darién, in El Darién, numbers have gone down quite a bit. You know, we were in July 23, we had 8,700 coming through El Darién in the south. Now we are in 909 every day. This is daily numbers. These numbers come from, we have 3 different, let's say, datas that come to us. The Darien ones come from Panama. The green ones come from our National Institute of Migration. But as you can see, in July, we had 44,000 more or less people 4,400 people coming through our borders in the south. Now we have 5,000 more or less. So still in the southern border, we do have a problem because a lot of people are still traveling between El Darién and Central America coming through our borders. And of course, we have Haiti and Cuba that are also numbers that are there. And then, well, the other ones I told you already about the northern side. The next one, please. Well, this is important because, of course, when we start listening that we are going to have massive deportations, I mean, we thought, okay, let's see what we're talking about. And so these 37 million Mexicans in the United States, 26 second, third generation, 11 at the first generation, 4 million of these Mexicans are undocumented. So one of the things we are requesting the government of the US is to document these 4 million people. Why? Because they are contributing to the economy. I mean, the income and the cumulative annual income or the contribution of the Mexicans to the US economy is $224 billion a year. Honestly, this is even higher than the Colombian GDP. So, for God's sake, this is what our Mexicans are contributing to the US economy. And of course, the remittances coming from the US to Mexico are $62 billion, of which this only represents 18% of their income, which means that 82% of that of the income that Mexicans are gaining in the US stays in the US economy. So out of 10 farm workers in the US, 7 are Mexicans. 7. So, I mean, these numbers are very impressive. So that's why, and this comes from the data of the US, actually. So these are the things that I think we have to pull together. And from your data, by the way, Andrew, from your database. So let's go. And of course, we have 53. Let's go back for a moment. We have 53 consulates in the US. This is the highest number of consulates of one country in another country. 53. Out of which we have made an agreement with Honduras and Guatemala. You can see the green state. I'm sure you know which state that is, Texas. Texas. So we made an agreement with Honduras and Guatemala that we are offering common services in our consulates for the 3 nationalities, each one of us. So if there's if an Honduran has a problem in Texas, our consulates are going to help in any way. And if one Mexican has a problem, the Honduran. So Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico in Texas. This is a pilot, but I hope we will be able to extend it. Next one, please. Then we did something that I'm sure you're going to love, and of course you can download it through this QR. But I tell you what it is about. It's about the Mexicans that are living in the U.S. Which municipality they are coming from? For example, if they are coming from Michoacan, which municipality of Michoacan, and in which county in the US they live. So now we have mapped out, so we know exactly where is the Mexicans in the US. Where are they? And where are they from? If they are from Michoacan, from Zacatecas, from whatever. So out of 12 million Mexicans live in California, but these are the counties where they live. And we also, in this document, you can see where they come from. In Arizona, 2 million. In Texas, 9 million. So I think this study shows very clearly how the movements come from. For example, there are a lot of families here in New York. They call it Puebla, York. Yes, because many of the Mexicans come from Puebla. That's true. So anyway, but you see what I mean? They call it Puebla, York, no question about it. But we wanted to identify, okay, where from Puebla they are coming from. And because the families pull them in. And so this demographic I think is very important. Next one, please. Then, of course, we have Palenque, which we feel very, very proud, and we are very grateful because we had the presidents came. We had the president of Cuba, we had the president of Honduras, we have the prime minister of Haiti, of Colombia, we have Maduro, because these countries are the countries that are sending migrants to Mexico and to the US. So we needed to sit down with each one of them and see how do we work together and make sure that we can put structural causes of migration on the table. How do we help each other? What are the things that we can pull to do for each one of us? So Mexico is contributing with $123 million. Frankly, very little money. helping 75,000 people. That's what we're doing with programs like Sembrando Vida, Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro, en fin, Juntos por el Bienestar. These are programs that go directly to the beneficiaries. Honestly, they have helped a lot in stopping the migration from its origins. And I think we can do even better. We have invited USAID to join us. But the problem is that and of course, we work directly with the beneficiaries and no intermediaries. And this is the thing. This is the beauty of these programs. For example, in Cuba, I don't know, we are working in Artemisa in this place where Cuba, and now we are getting a lot of help and they are asking for more support, which we are ready to give. La siguiente, por favor. And of course, we are also actively, I have to say, saying that we have to look into the sovereign debt because there's a lot of problems in our region of debt. I mean, just there are some countries that don't have even the money to do nothing but to pay the interest rates, and that's it. And our region is the most indebted region in the world. I mean, so if you can see, almost 70% of the countries have a very large debt. And of course, we also place a lot of negative impact in the coercive measures as a driver of irregular migration. So we are, yes, actively pushing for the dismantling of some of the vetoes and the ¿cómo se llama? The blockades and the sanctions, because we believe that they are not punishing the people. They are punishing the people, not the governments. And this is why we are actively trying to push that in the political agenda. The next one, please. And then this is something that we are very proud of. And we have done this together with IOM. And we want to thank you so much. That's Amy Pope, who personally has been involved in this initiative we call Tent, which this guy of the Giovanni, the yogurt, what's her name? What's his name? The owner of Giovanni. Of course, he's the guy. He's the guy behind on this. So when you go to buy yogurt, please buy Giovanni because he's really been very helpful to us. No kidding. No, the thing is that we have 65. No, what's his name? I don't remember now. But
I just remember the
please. The yogurt. You mean to that? I mean, I always go to the yogurt to the store and I say Giovanni, because he brought together 65 companies from the U.S. and from Mexico, by the way, and we put together with him and the National Employment Service, Mexico Te Emplea. We put a platform of 166 registered companies. 65 have already joined with job openings. And we really have a fantastic program. I don't know if you have the video here or where,
Yes.
but it has been so beautiful. Let me show you something as an example. I promise we're going to finish at 5. I really do. But I want you to see this because this is something that is going to touch your heart.
Estoy aquí desde el 22 de abril y hoy día me fue 10 días. Puedo decir que estaba un poquito difícil para mí de decidir que voy a dejar mi país, pero espero tener una vida mejor aquí. Es un proceso de empleo y estoy aquí para ver si puedo tener un empleo. Quiero decir muchísimas gracias con todos los mexicanos porque ellos son muy generosos y muy amables con nosotros. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, we call a meeting of 108 Asians.
Ya viene aquí por gusto trabajar. Yo quiero trabajo. Tengo mi familia, tengo 4 hijos. Pero cuando yo tengo mi evidencia, yo voy a hacer la forma de si puede estar mi familia. Bueno, todavía no puede decir que yo estoy bien porque no empieza todavía, pero yo creo que va bien. Yo tengo 7 meses aquí en México. Y tengo la noticia que aquí hay empresas que va a dar trabajo con la gente haitiana. Es lo que vengo aquí para buscar empleo. Y estamos esperando trabajo nosotros que están aquí.
Anyway, so what happened is that of 108 Asians that came, we did it together with the Asian embassy. and with tent and with everybody. And out of 108, 100 got out of there with a job. And they are still working because we do a follow-up. We monitor where they are. So this can be done. This can be done. And instead of the migrants looking alone for jobs, we can pull this together. We did this with Iowa. The next one.
His name is Hamdi.
That's the one. Andy. He's so good. Anyway, so labor mobility, this is where we need to go, and this is where we are going. We have with IOM, a repository of good practices, and this is something we have done in Mexico. We had this meeting of 30 countries participating, and honestly, I think this is the way to go. For example, the US offers visas H2, ¿cómo se dice? H2A and H2B, and we had around 400,000 people coming into the US regularly, safely, orderly last year. So this is a lot. La siguiente, por favor. And we are doing this in coordination with UNOPS and with UN as a whole, and Emerson. I want to thank Emerson because what we are doing right now is we are going to inaugurate, I think in a week's time or something, a multi-service center, one in Tapachula and one in Huizla. And these are centers where we receive the migrants. They are in the very southern part of Mexico where they come in. There are two shelters where they can come in and they find different types of services, education and health, and they can stay there overnight and they can stay. And then we want the companies to come to these shelters, to the recruitment officers of the companies. And this is working very, very well. I think we're going to inaugurate it probably when I'm out, but anyway, we tried to inaugurate it last week, but it was not finished. But my successor will be there, and you guys, Emerson, and everybody will be there because it's really a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place. La siguiente, por favor. The other thing we have done is that we are providing shelters all over the country, but basically we want to focus on 5 shelters. One is in Tijuana, Matamoros, Ciudad Juárez, and as I said, in Tapachula and in Huizla. But all over the country, we do have some shelters that are of extreme importance all over, and we hope to help really the migrants inside. La siguiente. These are all the agencies, the Mexican agencies that are helping. All of them are part of this exercise. We are talking about health. We are talking about because the other thing is we wanted them to be inscribed or apply to the Health Service of Mexico, el Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social. So that's why we did this county exercise, because we wanted to see what the migrant, who do they want to help back home? Who do they want to subscribe into the health system so they can help their families and etc. La siguiente, por favor. And of course, this is the most difficult part of the strategy, which is the return. First of all, we received Mexicans from the US. I think how many? 5, no? 5 flights, 4 flights a week that come from Texas. We have agreed with the US that we receive 4 flights a week. But before time, these flights were coming anywhere in Mexico. We decided not to do that. They come to a precise place, which is the AIFA, and we receive them in that airport, and we find places for them to go. We ask them, why did they leave? Why do they want to migrate? How can we really, again, help them to be included in their own communities? And we also return people to their own home countries. Cuba has been very generous in accepting the returnees that come from Mexico, Guatemala too, Honduras, Colombia. So we are doing this jointly. But the way we are returning people is that each person that is returned goes back with a fee. That is, Mexico provides a cooperation, ¿cómo se llama? Contribution of $100 per month for 6 months for that person when they go back home, that they can have some subsistence to be again integrated in their own communities. The last one, I think, yes. So this is an expression of our humanist policy, which is based on principles, fraternity, solidarity. We put people in the center. And of course, I have to say that López Obrador has been terrific in pulling this together with all the agencies in Mexico. So thank you so much. This is it, my dear Andrew. This is the Mexican, and we wanted to launch it here in New York with you. So the first time I presented. I hope you take it home. Spanish is in English.
Well done. No, I think with the applause tells you, I think great admiration, respect from all of us for this. We have 15 minutes left. We can always end early. I think that is, no one objects during Ungo Week to end early. But if anyone would like to make some short interventions before we end, please feel free to do so.
Hard to follow that presentation.
Hard to follow that. Okay. In that case, I think we have reached the end of the discussion. This has been a very rich conversation, both about the hemisphere broadly and a great deal of innovation going on in the hemisphere, but also what the Mexican government has been doing to set the stage for a new strategy that looks at Mexico in its complexity on migration, right? And as both a country that has many Mexicans abroad who are still part of the country, has people coming through, and has people making Mexico their home. So
I want to thank you, Andrew, because you haven't presented your organization, and you are one that helps us enormously. You and all the organizations in the US that are really taking care of migrants and pushing us, the governments, to do things right. I think the next step has to be what Marshall, you were saying about local authorities. We need to go to the local domain, and also to work with you guys, with the NGOs that are helping us a lot. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Take this back with you, and I hope we can continue working together. Thank you. No te lo digo.